Welcome to this edition of What Did I Miss, where today I'm talking about the second episode of the first season of Lower Decks, titled Envoys. The reception by the fans for the show has not been great so far since the first episode was released, so this is a show that really needs a few hits here in its first run if it wants to last past season 2. This episode tries to grab the attention of fans of the older generation with a lot of good references from Trek's gloried past, but did its own characters do enough to Trek on their own? I'll let you know how I felt after I go over a virtual smorgasbord of Easter eggs in the episode. This is What Did I Miss?
That's more your specialty.
So there will be spoilers from the first episode and from other Star Trek properties going forward. So if you don't want to know them, be warned. The main plot line for the episode has Ensign Boimler and Ensign Mariner accompanying a Klingon Corinne on an Envoy mission. Ensign Mariner mentions that all Klingons have an apostrophe in their name. I don't know if this is necessarily fair. It seems like it's more 50-50. I mean, there's plenty of famous Klingons that don't. There's Kang, General Chang, Worf, Martok, Kahless, Voq. There are plenty of Klingons that do, though. T'Kuvma, L'Rell, B'Elanna, Kalar. Boimler is practicing the Klingon phrase Nuknik, which is a general hello greeting in the language. Ensign Boimler is seen wearing a dress uniform, and Ensign Mariner asks him if he is getting married. We have seen multiple Starfleet officers get married in dress uniforms, most notably Commander Riker and Counselor Troi. While asleep, Ensign Mariner mentions the Moons of Nibia. While we've never seen the Moons of Nibia on screen, they were mentioned in Star Trek The Wrath of Khan during an infamous monologue about how far Khan was willing to go to kill Kirk. While sleeping, Mariner also mentions being buried alive. By this point, it's pretty obvious that she's suffering from some sort of post-traumatic stress. We have seen this in Star Trek before, most notably Nog in Deep Space Nine. There was an episode titled Siege of AR 558 where his leg was shot off after they were defending a post from the Dominion during the Dominion War. After Nog loses his leg, he must recuperate, and in an episode titled It's Only a Paper Moon, it shows how he works through his PTSD with the help of a hologram lounge singer named Vic Fontaine. It's really a great episode. It's one of the many great episodes of Deep Space Nine. If you haven't watched Deep Space Nine yet, I totally recommend it. When Mariner sees Corinne on the shuttle, she goes at him with a Dak'tak, which is a Klingon knife. We have seen this weapon used in Star Trek before, and while the Bat'leth is definitely the most popular Klingon weapon, the Dak'tak is probably the most deadly. Speaking of Klingons, it's nice to see that the show is going with the TNG era style of Klingon. Discovery, as well as the 3 movies in the Kelvin timeline, changed the appearance of Klingons, and the appearance of Klingons have changed multiple times. I think it's been 6 or 7 times by this point. It'd be nice if they just chose one style and went with it. And it's nice that Lower Decks seems to be going with this style. Mariner mentions that she's been on Grey Ops missions. This may be a reference to Section 31, a clandestine agency working alongside Starfleet. We've seen Section 31 pop up a few times in Star Trek, most notably in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the movie Star Trek Into Darkness, as well as the recent show Star Trek Discovery. Ensign Mariner and Corinne are singing a Klingon drinking song. We've seen this a few times too, most famously Worf in Deep Space Nine, as well as the Doctor and Seven in Star Trek Voyager. When they land in Little Kronos, they ask for some gach. We've seen gach multiple times in Star Trek, and we know that it's best served warm and wiggly. Mariner mentions a planet called Jaxa Prime. I couldn't find a reference to Jaxa Prime, but this could be a reference back to the original Lower Decks episode from Star Trek The Next Generation, as one of the characters we followed in that episode was named Jaxa. When Boimler tries to land the shuttle, he uses the landing code Gamma 74 and is cut off. The number 74 is also used in the stardate of the first episode, and as I mentioned in my video for that episode, 74 is an inverse of the number 47, which is very popular in Star Trek and is meant to be a sign of good luck. Ensign Mariner mentions that she is blood bonded with Corinne. This may mean that she shares a blood oath with him. A blood oath is a Klingon tradition that was explored in the episode named Blood Oath on the series Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Ensign Mariner mentions the drink Raktajino. This is a strong form of Klingon coffee that has been mentioned multiple times, also most notably in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Khitomer Accords are referenced. This is the peace treaty that stands between the Federation and the Klingon Empire. The treaty is named after Camp Khitomer, which is a site that is shown at the end of Star Trek VI during an attempted assassination of the Federation president. Ensign Mariner mentions a Klingon penal colony. This may be a reference to Ruapente. Ruapente is known as the Devil's Graveyard and was shown in Star Trek VI, as well as the deleted scenes of the first Star Trek movie in the Kelvin timeline. Ensign Boimler mentions that there are Kaylons at the market and they are not trustful of others. Kaylons were featured in the TNG episode Half a Life. During Ensign Rutherford's command training, Commander Ransom says something about the hot pulse of a joystick in your hand. This is kind of weird because all they do is tap panels on that show. On the show Star Trek Voyager, Lieutenant Paris created a shuttlecraft named the Delta Flyer that did use analog controls. Another thing about Ransom that I did not pick up on in the first episode, there was another Starfleet officer named Ransom. There was a Captain Ransom of the ship called the Equinox. The Voyager came across them while they were in the Delta Quadrant. Captain Ransom was a tragic character. He was not really good or bad. He was kind of the anti-Janeway. But it'd be interesting if this character was somehow related to that one, as their personalities are very different. Commander Ransom suggests that Ensign Rutherford use the Janeway protocol. This is an obvious reference to now Admiral Janeway, who was captain of the USS Voyager and played by Kate Mulgrew. During another part of the command simulation, Commander Ransom mentions that there's a small asteroid headed towards the ship. I don't see how this is a problem, since the main focus of the deflector dish is to deflect asteroids from the path of a starship. This whole command simulation sequence to me seems like a reference to the Kobayashi Maru. The Kobayashi Maru was a famous command sequence that James Kirk passed under less than reputable circumstances. Back on the planet, Ensign Boimler is accused of wanting Jamaharan. Jamaharan is something that has been referenced before with the planet Risa. There's this thing called a Horgon, which is also seen in the episode, but it's basically like the tiki god of doing it. They tried to give one to Captain Picard. Bashir also had one in Deep Space Nine. The woman that attacks Ensign Boimler is said to be an Anabaj. It makes sense if she's empathic why there are Ferengis and Kaylons there, because we've seen that Ferengis and Kaylons are immune to betazoids who are also empathic. When Ensign Rutherford joins the medical team, this marks the first time we have ever seen one crew member wear all three colors of the Starfleet uniform. There have been two characters that have changed their colors at least once, with Ensign Chekhov upgrading from red to yellow, and Commander Worf changing from yellow to red. We get to see the Bajoran head of security again, Lieutenant Shax, who has a holodeck program named Smorgasbord. I thought that was kind of funny. The program creates about a dozen Borg drones. The Borg are a race of cybernetic aliens that were pretty much the big bad of the TNG era, even if they were later powered down a little bit by the show Voyager as well as the Star Trek Online video game. Lieutenant Shax makes a statement where he thanks the prophets. This is a reference to the religion of the Bajoran people. They believe that their gods live in the stable wormhole that links the Gamma Quadrant to the Alpha Quadrant and is outside of their planet, Bajor. Ensign Mariner mentions that you should not mess around with Andorians. The show Enterprise showed that Andorians are a very aggressive race that does not trust many other races, especially Vulcans. Ensign Boimler mentions that he understands who Andorians are and understands who all the founders of the Federation are. The founders of the Federation are Andor, Earth, Vulcan, and Tellar. Tellar, or Tellarites, are also mentioned in the episode. Like the Klingons, this is another race that's been in Star Trek for a while but has seen multiple upgrades and redos. It'd be nice if they just chose one and stuck with it. We see a Vandorian in the episode. The last time we saw a Vandorian was in Star Trek the Animated Series, when they were famously defeated by a bottle of mustard. During the bar fight, we see a race of rock people. I'm not sure, but this may be a reference to the deleted scenes of Star Trek V. It's kind of funny if you can find it somewhere. If you remember the end of Star Trek V, it's Shakari, and there's a lot of smoke and stuff, and they're basically running from lightning. Originally, they had this race of rock people that was going to fight Kirk and make it more like the old episodes, but it kind of looked more like the Stonehenge scene from Spinal Tap, so they cut it and went with what you saw on film. During the bar scene, we see a Lurian. Morn was a famous Lurian and sat at Quark's bar at Deep Space Nine. During his breakdown, Boimler mentions sending a distress call that no one will get to in time. This may be a reference to the Deep Space Nine episode, The Sound of Her Voice. It was season 6. Deborah Wilson played the voice. Again, if you haven't watched Deep Space Nine, go watch Deep Space Nine. It's amazing. We are introduced to a Ferengi who somehow gets mistaken for a Bolian by Ensign Mariner. This Ferengi is kind of interesting because when we first meet him, he acts more like the Ferengi that we were used to seeing in The Next Generation, with the light whips and the hissing and all the weird movements. But then when Mariner talks to him later, he seems to be more normal, like the Ferengi we're used to seeing on Deep Space Nine. Those were all the Easter eggs and references that I saw, but if you see anything that I missed, please point it out in the comments. There are parts of this episode that I enjoy. I obviously appreciate a good Easter egg, but I can't say that I enjoyed this episode as much as I did the first one. So far, I am not loving Ensign Boimler's naivete, and even for a cartoon, it is not at all believable. I would like to explore Ensign Mariner's past a bit more and see some of her experience. Ensign Rutherford and Tendi are fine and have enough going on that keeps me interested in both characters on their own, as well as their new budding relationship. The crew is kind of hit and miss with me so far. I love Shax, and Commander Ransom and Dr. Tahana are okay, but they come off like caricatures of past characters. Every Trek show has taken from the shows before it, but they each have their own voice, and at least for me, I'm having trouble hearing the voice of the show at this time. If you do want to watch the first episode for free, it is available on YouTube, and I will put the link down below in the description. But you tell me, what did I miss? I really appreciate the feedback that I received and the support from the community, especially on Facebook, after my first episode, and I hope that our fan base continues to grow. Just a reminder that I will be reviewing episodes of Lower Decks as well as Discovery each week they come out, so please subscribe if you like what you hear. Also, this week I will be releasing another video. This time it will be on the Umbrella Academy. So if you like them, check it out. I also have a video out there on The Boys for Season 2. It's coming out in a couple of weeks, so if you're interested in that, please check it out. So I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?